How do you convince a customer to buy? Now, this is something which is very close to the heart of every salesperson, isn't it? How do you convince? Because you talk to people, you explain your product, you demonstrate to them, and you are not able to convince the person to buy from you. You feel disheartened, you feel bad. Hello friends, this is Sanjay Singh, your sales coach. If you are also battling with this problem, please watch this video till the end. How do you convince a person to buy? Now the first thing that you need to understand is connect, to communicate, to convince, to close. 4C, connect, to communicate, to convince, to close. So first you have to connect. You cannot start your sales communication without having connected to the customer. So once you connect, then you start communicating. Once you start communicating, you will convince and maybe you will close. How do you connect? Now connecting to a customer is known as the art of rapport building. I have made a separate video on the art of rapport building. I am putting the link below, check it out. So first thing you need to learn is connect. Till your heart tells you that you are connected to the customer, do not start your sales conversation. Do not start your sales communication, because it's like two wires. Unless the two wires are joined together, current will not flow. So connect before you start communicating. My rule number one. Now once you have connected to the customer, you need to understand that what are you trying to convince the customer about? Are you trying to convince the customer about your product or your service? Well, that's wrong. You need not convince a customer about your product or about your service. Then what do you need to convince about? You need to convince the customer that he has got a pain, he has got a risk, he has got a challenge, he has got a need. Because if the customer is convinced about the pain or risk or challenge or need at his end, he will start cooperating with you in the process, in the sales process. But if he is not convinced about a problem at his end, or if he is not convinced about the need at his end, or a pain or a risk, he is not going to be convinced. Now what do I mean by a pain or a risk? Now suppose I am talking to a manufacturing process customer who is going to buy raw material from me, and if my insight into his factory tells me that today he is doing a waste of 8%, if I can reduce his waste by better raw material from 8% to 6%, I am going to give him a financial benefit of around 20 lakhs in 1 month. Now this is a pain, isn't it? When I tell to the customer that, hey, I can save 20 lakhs for you by decreasing your waste from 8% to 6% every month, his eyes are going to become big, isn't it? Now this is what I call identify the pain, risk, challenge or need at the customer's end and try to address that. Try to convince the customer on that rather than trying to convince the customer about your product or service, because once the pain, risk or challenge is identified, you are now going to use your product or service as a solution to solve the pain, risk or challenge. So sale of your product it comes as a byproduct of the act of convincing the customer on his pain, risk or challenge, right? So next time you encounter a scenario where you are supposed to convince someone, rule number one, establish the connect. Rule number two, what are you convincing about? Convince about the pain, risk, challenge at the customer's end. Once you have done these two rules, move on to rule number three, which says that once the customer is convinced, prepare a business case presentation for him to understand, for him to start understanding that he's not just convinced about your idea. In fact, this conviction of his is going to accrue financial benefit to him. So in my example, if I would just have convinced the customer that, look, I'm going to decrease your waste by 2%, he would not be convinced enough. But when I said that I'm going to reduce your waste by 2%, which translates to 20 lakh of rupees for you every month and 2.4 crores every year, the customer is finally convinced. So rule number 3, by the time you give the financial benefit which accrues to the customer, you put a final stamp of authority on convincing your customer. Hello friends, I'm sure you would, next time you encounter a customer, you will feel better to convince a customer because now you know what exactly you need to convince your customer upon. This is Sanjay Singh, your sales coach, with a mission to empower 1 million salespersons with the science of selling before 2025. Please help me connect to all the salespeople in this world known to you, and also help me in subscribing to the channel because Mr. Google wants this to further boost this post. Take care. Bye-bye.